All right, joining me now is Scott Jennings, CNN political commentator and former special assistant to President George W. Bush, and A. Scott Bolden, former D.C. Democratic Party chairman and chair of the National Bar Association PAC. Gentlemen, good morning to you.
Good morning.
All right, so we got Scott and Scott. And A. Scott Bolden, just this one time, please, may I use your first name just so that we're not confused on who I'm asking a question to?
Absolutely. You mean my first name, Alan?
Alan. Just for today.
My mother will love you for that. Go
Excellent.
right ahead.
Thank you very much. You're Alan for just the next 6.5 minutes. So let me start with Scott then. Scott, question for you. Have the North Koreans done enough to earn this 90-minute one-on-one in the Oval Office with the president?
Well, I don't think they've done enough to get relief from the sanctions. I think that both sides are inching towards a meeting that is absolutely necessary if we want to have a denuclearized peninsula. One thing is clear, if they don't talk and they don't meet, we're going to have the status quo, and the status quo is not acceptable to the American people, and it's frankly shouldn't be acceptable to the rest of the world. So I do think they have to do certain meetings like this to get ready for a summit. And I want to see this succeed. I'm dubious that the North Koreans are ever going to denuclearize. Obviously, their mission is to get sanctions relief while giving up as little as possible. And we have to probe their government to see if they're willing to go farther than what they've done in the past. So I'm cautiously optimistic about what the Trump
Secretary of State. Could this meeting with Kim Jong-chol just happen with the Secretary of State to invite a second-tier leader in to meet with the President of the United States for an hour and a half? That seems like a gift already for a regime that's looking for legitimacy on the stage.
Yeah, it's a legitimate point. On the other hand, I think Donald Trump probably believes he's the best negotiator in his government. He's the one who is going to be able to read these people the best. That's sort of how he ran his campaign. It's how he runs his administration. So I'm not surprised that he's in the weeds on this. Also, this is a legacy issue for him. If he were able to somehow solve this, this goes down as the defining foreign policy issue of his term in office. So given the way he has positioned himself as the principal prime negotiator of the American people, I'm not surprised he's in every single meeting, frankly.
Alan, now to you. The president, instead of what he said several weeks ago, was that he's hoping this meeting will be a success and getting rid of the nukes in a single meeting. He's now suggesting that there will be a series of meetings. This is just a getting to know you. Is this an appropriate tempering of hopes, lowering of expectations?
Politically, for him, it is, but I think it's really a very wrong-headed approach, because look at the history of the U.S. and North Korea negotiations over 20, 30, 40 years and prior presidents. They have these very elongated meetings. We make a lot of economic support and concessions to North Korea in exchange for them either trying to accept democracy or reducing their weapons or reducing their human rights, and it never happens. They get the economic support, but America historically has not gotten much out of those elongated meetings. I think the president's approach for any negotiation, whether I'm settling the case or whether I'm on the world stage with North Korea, is you settle, you negotiate from a position of strength. You do it with maximum pressure versus saying we're not going to use that term anymore. And the North Korea has shown you who they are. This is a rogue regime, and he's got a nuclear warhead now, at least most of us think so, and it's gotten him to the world stage. Yeah. It's gotten him to the negotiation table with Donald Trump in the U.S., and guess what? It's worked to get him there. He's shown you who he is, and now why would he stop, if you will? Because he's been very successful. The pressure is all on the U.S. to get a deal. There's no pressure on North Korea, and by the way, they've got some new friends now, China and Russia, which is really going to make negotiations and long-term impact really messy.
Yeah, Lavrov in Pyongyang just a couple of days ago. Scott, back to you. And this decision not to talk about human rights in this first meeting yesterday. We know the president also didn't talk about human rights with King Salman of Saudi Arabia, didn't talk about it with Duterte of the Philippines, didn't talk about it with Xi of China, didn't talk about it with Erdogan of Turkey, and on and on. Why isn't this president having these conversations? And should human rights be part of this discussion with North Korea?
Well, I hope it's part of the discussion, but I think ultimately the number one goal here is denuclearization. And until we achieve denuclearization, everything else, unfortunately, I think has to be secondary. I'd like to go back to a point that was just made.
Go ahead.
All the pressure is not on us. The pressure is on North Korea. The only reason they're at the table here is because the maximum pressure sanctions have worked. This nation is being starved, and that now has reached Kim's inner circle. And number two, we have the military resolve that they now believe we are willing to use. So the pressure is not on us. The pressure is on Kim to get sanctions relief. And the pressure is on Donald Trump to continue to show that kind of resolve so that they understand they can't come into this process and leave without giving up their nuclear weapons. They have to believe that we're willing to use our military. I think that's ultimately, frankly, what's driven them to the table.
Alan, let me ask you about this. Let me ask you quickly about the human rights issue, and I want to flip the question this way. In 2015, when President Obama was pushing the Iran nuclear deal, and there were questions about why doesn't this deal approach or deal with the American detainees? Why does this not impact any of the actions as it relates to sponsoring terror across the Middle East? And President Obama said there's one goal: to keep Iran from getting a weapon. Why doesn't that justification apply here for North Korea?
Well, that justification does, at least according to the Trump administration. But here's the deal: North Korea is far more dangerous to the world, far more isolated than Iran is or could ever be. And so I agree that if denuclearization is the number one goal, and I think it is, but the history of North Korea against South Korea, against Japan and others, they're loaded up on issues that have been unresolved because North Korea simply has not been accessible by the rest of the world. And so I think, this whole idea of ignoring North Korea's prior human rights violations and what have you is very dangerous because they are not to be trusted. And I think any good deal to denuclearize North Korea has to include not only verifying that they're doing it, because having the nukes has helped them get to where they are, but secondly, the human rights violations has got to be monitored and addressed because of over several decades it has gone unresolved.
I've just got to point out that this is the exact opposite argument that we heard from Democrats in 2015 when they supporting the Iran deal that dealt with nothing more than the inspections and making sure that Iran did not get
perhaps
their hands
that
on a
was
nuclear
all that
weapon.
could be on the table at that time.
And maybe
it's a very different deal.
And for those who were saying that human rights should be discussed as part of this deal, they can only go back to their quotes from 3 years ago. Alan Scott Bolden, back to A. Scott Bolden, and Scott Jennings. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.